What it do, man? It's your boy LP, aka L Peasy. Posted up with my little homie, my oldest boy, JJ Jizzle. You know what I'm saying? We turned up.
Sup?
So we chilling, man. We just kind of talking about certain things or whatever. You know, we was going over this book. It's called To Be Popular or Smart. And it's talking about the pressures that the of the black peer group. You know, a study came out in 1965 asking what were the primary influences on youth and young adults. And at that time, the primary influence was the family. Then after that, it was the school. Then after that, it was the church. Then after that, it was the peer group. Then after that, it was television. All right. They did the study again in the 80s. This book is based off of, something. Jawanza Kunjufu put the book together, and that book was put out in the 80s. But in the 80s, they did that again, and it come to find out that the primary influences, number one, was the peer group. The peers was the number one influence on the lives of youth and young adults. After the peer group, it was rappers. After rappers, it was television. After television, it was the family. After family, it was the school. Church is nowhere in it after that. So we have to understand what we're dealing with right now with our youth and young adults. The primary influence is the peer group. So what he's communicating in this book, he was talking about how to cope with being smart or intelligent or not fitting the cultural norm of black people. I was talking to my son because, my son is very intelligent, very smart young man. He actually was just tested, and he's in the fourth grade, and he can read, and I know, dude. He can read and retain the information better than 93% of the other fourth graders in America. In America, not Alabama. Across the country, he reads and retains information better than 93% of fourth graders across the country. This dude is unreal. He reads the books that I read. But anyway, with that being said, a lot of times, my son gets ostracized and criticized, and a lot of times, the peer group kind of pushes him aside, because he speaks very well, because he's smart, because he makes A's and stuff like that. And then he doesn't play sports and, stuff like that or whatever. What Jawanza Kunjufu is explaining in his book is that he was able to overcome what he dealt with because, number one, his parents built a strong sense of self-esteem in him. So he had a high self-esteem. But the reason why he was able to get through the criticism and he didn't experience ultimate rejection from his peers was because he could dance, because he was an athlete, because he could talk the talk. You know what I'm saying? And things of that nature. Those were the things that was able to get him through. With that being said, he's communicating that they can build bridges with the peer group. They can still be smart because he talked about how when he went to college, he was ultimately pushed aside because all of his peers was joining fraternities, sororities. They was getting high and partying and stuff like that. And he chose to get on the debate team. And so they totally criticized him and talked about him and pushed him aside. The reason why he said he was not ultimately rejected was because, he was still, he was playing sports and he could talk the talk, even though he has the ability to speak correctly, this, that, and the other, he still at the same time could, shuck and jive or use ebonics, what we would say. These are things that we have to teach our children. I believe personally that our children, black children, should be bilingual in the sense of being able to, number one, be able to speak the English language. They have to be able to speak the English language. And they should be very, very fluent with Ebonics. It's very important because that is what will help them to make connections with their peers. We cannot expect to have our children, we put them in private school and we put them away from the cultural norm because, we as black folk, we like to do our best to get away from black folk, And so with that being said, a lot of times we pull our children away from black children and they're being put into a culture where they have to identify with another culture. Now they don't know how to communicate or identify with the black culture. So I believe that we should train our children to be able to, even though they may be able to read very well, speak very well, they're very smart, but they still have to be able to make connections with the other children, with the other black children. This is the reason why I encourage hey, dude, come on, man. You tripping. I didn't tell you they were doing a video. Let him go. 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 This is why we have to, this daddy problems. But anyway, it's all good. This is why it's very important for our children to be able to make those connections. Now, especially, this is a very sensitive issue. Biracial children. A lot of times, biracial children they're forced to have to pick a side. But one thing that they deal with is a lot of times with the white side of the family or with white people, the child is not white enough. And then with black people, the child is not black enough. So that child a lot of times is trying to struggle. Even President Obama talked about that in his book on how he had to struggle with picking a side and finding his identity once he realized, because, a lot of times people say, well, I trained my child, to not identify. Well, I trained my child not to see color and this, that, and the other. Okay, you may train your child not to see color, but guess what? Society gonna see color and society is gonna see black. So whenever they address President Obama and they say all kind of negative things about President Obama, they don't say that biracial man. Nah, they say that black man, and they use some other choice words, unfortunately. So with that being said, biracial children, I believe that, they are considered black, and society is going to consider them black, and society is going to treat them as being black. And so with that being said, they're going to have to be educated on the truth of black culture and black history, the truth, the great things that black people have done throughout world history. And they have to be taught that their history did not start with slavery. You see what I'm saying? And so because a lot of black biracial children have gotten into that mentality, a lot of times they don't want to identify with black. There was a kid, I was doing an event and they had, it was like a primarily white audience or whatever. So one of the kids came to me, he's like, hey LP, me and you got a connection. I'm like, why? He's like, because I'm biracial, I'm half black, so I can connect with you. And I was like, oh really? I was like, what do you mean you half black? No, you black. He was like, no, I'm not. I don't act like that. So he equated being black with acting a certain way. You get what I'm saying? So I sat him down. I was like, hey, look, man, being black is not a negative thing. Unfortunately, society and things on television have presented that, but that's not the case. Black people have done, black man created the stoplight, created the toilet, created the pacemaker, created, I just begin to talk about all the great things black people have done in history, and he had no idea. With that being said, we have to be able to help our children to identify with their peers, this book, I want to encourage this book by Jawanza Kunjufu to be popular or black, the Black Peer Group. Check it out. Me and my son, we meditating on it right now. We getting it in. I'll let you know.